The Bleacher Report app is your destination for sports. Right now, the NBA's heating up, March Madness is here, and MLB is almost back. Every day there's a new headline, a new highlight, a new moment you've got to see for yourself. That's why I stay locked in with the Bleacher Report app. For me, it's about staying connected to my sports. I can follow the teams I care about, get real-time scores, breaking news, and highlights all in one place. Download the Bleacher Report app today so you never miss a moment.
Our first live recording. Now, let me repeat that. Our very first live recording. Now, how cool is this? It's South by Southwest time here in Austin, Texas. Now, if you haven't heard about it, tens of thousands of people descend on Austin for tech, film, and music events. And this year, we got to participate at the magnificent SoHo House. In today's episode, Turk Pipkin joins me. Now, you may know him from The Sopranos, The Leftovers, his multitudes of books that he's penned, his nonprofit, The Nobility Project, or the many films he's made, and many of them are about animals. Now, we talk flamingos, the battle won to save them, what a flamboyance is. Now, you're just going to have to wait to find out. We talk monarchs, their 3,000-mile migration, and so much more. Now, here's the funny. What does a butterfly do at a party? Any ideas? Well, it just flutters around. I had to. Anyways, we also talk about gorillas, lots about gorillas, and for the first time ever live episode, having Turk there, it was such a treat. So get ready. The list of things we talk about is long, almost as tall as Turk. And let me tell you, he's really tall. Get ready for a good one.
For real, for real, for real, for real. For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and games from wacky to insane. For real, you're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Everybody, and welcome back to the For Real Podcast. Today is going to be a great day. It's a special treat. I have a guest today that you may recognize. He was on The Sopranos. He was in Leftovers. He's written tons of books. He's done this amazing project called the Nobility Project. We're building schools all over Africa, but more importantly, he's a really good friend of mine, Turk Pipkin.
Hello, 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 hello. How's everyone?
Well, I thought we would start is talk about you. It's South by Southwest, by the way, and we're live at the SoHo House Austin. And thanks to them, we're here. By the way, the staff here, they're really family to me. They've always been so wonderful to me. I'm just so lucky to be able to do this and feel privileged. But I want to talk about you, Turk. Let's go back in time. You go back as far as you want. You're from Texas. Let's talk about it. And I also want to talk about your experience at South by, and then we'll get into all the animal documentaries that you've done and some of the amazing work you've done.
Well, go back as far as I want. Like, well, when I was just a gleam in my parents' eyes, or something after that.
Let's go after the gleam.
Okay, let's do. Well, let's start with South by. I've been in Austin for a very long time. We're a city that almost, it's like this country. Almost everybody in Austin is an immigrant at some level or another. They came from another city in Texas or town in Texas, or then they came from another state. Now they just come from all over the world. And I came from San Angelo, West Texas, to go to school here long ago. And every time I managed to slip away for a while, I came back because Austin. And eventually, I had a career in books and television, and eventually my wife and I, Christy and I, founded the Nobility Project, this nonprofit. It's great to be here during South by because the origins of the Nobility Project was a film called Nobility, a feature doc that premiered at South by 20 years ago, and 21 years ago, I think now. And Nobility was a look at the world's problems through the eyes of Nobel laureates. And we started with Desmond Tutu, which is a pretty good start. And all three of the next film was a look at solutions to the world problems. That was one piece at a time. And then Building Hope was focused on one of those solutions, on education. And I ended up spending a lot of time in Kenya. Somewhere in there, my path started crossing paths with what your podcast is all about, with conservation issues and a lot of endangered and otherwise really wonderful animals that we have not been great caretakers are, but we're learning to do better.
I want to go back a little bit more, though, because I know your Esther Follies days. I know you juggling on the thing. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to get into a little bit more of a gleam, but let's go there.
A little bit more. Well, I mean, Esther's Follies is quite amazing. It's maybe not as famous nationwide as, say, Second City or the Groundlings, but it's a musical variety, fabulous show that's been going in Austin since, I don't know what year, since around 1980, I think. I can't remember. I'd performed a lot at Armadillo World Headquarters, which most people know, and did the last show at the Dillo, and kind of moved over when things started happening at Esther's, and was a regular there for many years. And then I moved to L.A. and started doing television, and I don't know how you end up moved television to L.A. and start doing television is, which most people just go, well, how? And I have no idea how. My friend Harry Anderson, who people know from as a star in Night Court, and he was a star on Cheers before that, and another series after Night Court. Harry and I were both street performers, and Harry came back from a visit to Ireland, a long trip, 4 or 5 months in Ireland with his wife, and they stayed with me in Austin. And I said, what are you going to do now? And Harry said, I'm going to go to L.A. and be a TV star. And I didn't even own a TV. I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, yeah, you should come with me. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, let me know. Let me know how that goes. And then about 6 months later, he said, you really should come out here. This is going well. So that led to a lot of good things. But I just kept coming back to Austin, no matter how much time or how much work I did in L.A. And that kind of put the kibosh on Esther's, but it moved me into a lot of comedy clubs in L.A., which was fun, and writing a lot of television in L.A., and I somehow learned how the television business worked. Then eventually I learned enough that I didn't like the way the television business worked.
So I heard a rumor. You know some guy from Texas by the name of Willie?
Yeah, a lot of people think Willie Pipkin is my son, but he's a guitar player that plays at the Continental Club, almost just down the street from here. There's another Willie that people are familiar with named Willie Nelson. Yeah. Willie and I have been friends. I looked it up recently. When was that year that he was a headliner at Aquafest? Aquafest was a fabulous Austin festival, and which should come back. Really, it's one of those institutions we're really missing. And I was opening for Willie at Auditorium Shores, and there was a massive crowd, tens of thousands. And I hadn't been advertised as usual as the opening act. So when the MC went out and said, he's one of Austin's favorite, and the crowd went, rah! So let's hear it for Turk Pipkin. And they went, huh? But a lot of them knew me, so they tolerated me. I looked out there, they were smiling, but they kind of had their arms crossed. They were just going, do what you're doing, we're just waiting for Willie. And I did my act, it was fine. I walked off. Townsend Miller used to be a music critic in Austin. He was the promoter and the MC. He said, you got to go back out and do 10 more minutes. And I said, if I go out there, they will kill me. And he said, no, you got to. Willie's on the bus. He won't come off the bus. I said, you walk out there with me. About the time we got to the mic, Townsend was looking at the people holding beer bottles in the crowd. In the old days, you had bottles on these festivals. He said, are they going to throw those? And I went, they are absolutely going to throw those. So Townsend said, Willie will be right out. And I walked off and said, what's the problem? And he said, Willie won't come off the bus. And I said, what did he say? And he said, well, we don't know. We are afraid to go over there. And I was like, you got to be kidding. I walked over to the bus and went, bang, bang, bang. And Willie immediately opened the door. He was standing right behind the door because the crowd was going, Willie, Willie. He said, yeah. And I said, Mr. Nelson, I was your opening act, and they're ready for you to come on stage. He said, I've been standing there for 15 minutes. Why wouldn't somebody come get me? So turned out to be a lucky moment for me. We've been friends ever since.
Well, you guys were involved with Farm Aid, and you guys all probably know Lucas Nelson, but there's Amy Nelson and Mike. You've watched those kids grow up and that are now great musicians and adults as well.
Yeah, Amy and her sister Paula, their mom is Connie Nelson, and they were a little bit older and are a big part of the music scene here, both of them. And then Willie ended up married to Annie Nelson, and they had 2 kids, Micah and Lucas. Actually, Christy and I were living in L.A., and we wanted to have kids, but nothing. We weren't getting pregnant, and I said, why don't we just move back to Austin? And it's just too stressful out here. I think maybe that's the problem. So then Willie called Christy and called me and said, I need to talk to Christy. He said, I need somebody to run my film and television production out at Luck at his ranch. And would you move back to Texas? And we were like, we'll be there tomorrow. And so then when we came back, there were 3 or 4 other women had other jobs, all married, that had other jobs at Willie's. And about 6 months later, all of them were pregnant, including Christy. And all the guys were looking at Willie going, what's going on here? But Mike and Lucas were born around the same time, and Lucas Nelson, we were born around the same time as our kids. So they were very close, and we're all still pretty close.
Last thing, and then we're going to kind of segue into the animal thing, Farm Aid, because you guys were involved with that a lot. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think it's a great event, and it does great things. So let's talk a little bit about that.
You know, a lot of people don't understand. I mean, Farm Aid started because Bob Dylan watched Live Aid with Bob Geldof and everybody, the concert for Ethiopia, and probably the most famous concert of all time. But anyway, he watched Live Aid. He called Willie up and said, why doesn't somebody doodle something like that for America's family farmers? And Willie said, okay, I will. Because anytime he hears a good idea, Willie rolls with it. So Willie and Neil Young and the board of directors of the famous musicians and others has shifted over the years, but Willie and John Mellencamp and Neil Young have been core. Willie he signs all the checks that go out to family farmers. I mean, it really is an amazing organization. The first live broadcast was very big, and they just have kept doing it. Not every year. They missed a couple early on, but they have raised millions and millions of dollars that supports family farmers. And they are really involved with the farming issues, and they lobby. And corporate farming is not the best thing for the food we eat, and it's not the best thing for the land that we depend upon. And so somewhere in there, Christy ended up producing a couple of those broadcasts. They're hard. Back then, they were live broadcasts, like 10, 11 hours long. That's a tough show. And I would write, the script would be 6 or 7 inches thick. The binder, I would write all these intros and parts and bios and background. And there's no way I could do that now. I'm way too old for that. But we're still supporters. We still go when we can. Last night in Austin, Texas, was what's called potluck out at Willie's Ranch. Willie and Lucas and Micah, there's an organic dinner for some kind of high-end Farm Aid donors. And then Willie and Lucas and Micah played a concert for probably 250 people. It's not many opportunities to see Willie Nelson at age 92 with a crowd that small. But he's still going. He just booked dates. If you want to see Willie, I wasn't sure he was going to tour this year. He's got dates booked in March and April and May, which is incredible.
I lied. I got one more thing. Let's talk about Nobility. So you talked about the film that you did. Let's talk about what you did. I think it's an amazing film. And by the way, the Desmond Tutu part, one piece at a time, there's an old African saying. You can talk about that. And let's talk about what you guys done. You've done amazing things. I've had the opportunity to be around it a lot. I've been in Africa multiple times working with these guys and that. But I think you should learn about it and then find more about it. And your guys are still really active on it. So let's go there.
Well, Tutu was a good start and a little intimidating. And Ann Richards, who was a good friend of Governor Ann Richards, was a good friend of ours, and Christy and I had worked with her, and Ann knew Tutu, and she prepped me in advance and said, he's a bit of a scamp, and he tells a lot of jokes, and he's not exactly what you think he's going to be. So we walked into this interview, and I had my cameras and everything set up, and we walked into the interview, and cameramen were there, and my audio guys, and a lighting guy, and Christy and me. And he said, everybody come here. And then we all held hands. And he said, well, let's start with a prayer. And which was beautiful. And I was thinking back to Ann Richards saying, he's just going to be telling jokes. And then we started. And then immediately he thought of a joke, which was actually quite outrageous. He is a really brilliant man, to inspire, billions of people around the world. was really extraordinary. You referred to his famous saying, because I was asking him about the enormity of these problems in the world. When you look at, we're looking at other problems now. They're always kind of the same problems, but they're new variations of them. Right now, we got big wars going on, and we've got a lot of other issues going on. But we were looking at, at hunger in the world, at conflicts, and at education, at nutrition, and there are enormous problems. And I asked Tutu how he remains, optimistic in the face of the size of these problems. And he said, in Africa, we have a saying, there's only one way to eat an elephant, one piece at a time. And it really is the only way to address these problems, maybe not when it's a war, but certainly when as we ended up working in education and on these conservation issues, you just have to start somewhere. You never really know what's going to come from it. Everything good you do has ramifications down the road. And when you do it, you have no idea what those will be. And the converse is probably true, too. When you get ticked off in traffic or you cheat somebody out of a deal or whatever it is, those consequences are real, too. And you don't know it, but they will be.
And we'll be right back.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
South by Southwest, we're here live right now during that, so you have a lot of history with that. And the films we're going to talk about have premiered there. Do you have any stories that are, we're here right now, but some like crazy stories that you want to add to it? And let's talk about the animals after that.
My favorite is one year I used to host panels like this one with actors and filmmakers and one thing.
Great guys like me.
And stars like you. So
that's it.
One year I was hosting an acting panel with Jeffrey Tambor, a fantastic comedic actor from its Gary Shandling show and a million other shows, and Cheech Marin, and God, who else do we have? I think Sam Jackson was on it. And I at one point I said, hey, does anybody have would like to tell a story about the first time you were on camera, first time you acted in a film? And Jeffrey Tambor, who's just made so much film and television, everybody told a funny story, but he topped everybody. He said, I got cast in this film, and I had one line, and they got me in hair and makeup, and he had hair then, he said, and got me in costume, and I went down to the set, and it was in like a bar restaurant scene, and the bar was really tall, and it's kind of a joke for people in the film business, but one of the assistants came over and said, would you like an apple? An apple is, of course, or he said, would you like a half apple? An apple is a box that you stand on if you're to get an eye line with another actor. A half apple is half the size of that box. So they came over and said, would you like a half apple? And he said, no, I just ate lunch. They got like a little place down here where you can eat. Now, in a room where everybody in there was an aspiring actor who thinks they know what they're doing, it was one of the loudest laughs I ever heard in my life. But, South by, they're giving it another shot this year. It's a new version of it. It's condensed a little bit, but they brought a lot of big names to town, so I guess it keeps going.
There's so many questions I have for you, but let's go to the animal thing because it's an animal podcast. Let's talk, and we'll get to how people can find all these films and that, but let's start with you did a film on flamingos. So let's talk about flamingos, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so to get to the short films, these three feature docs that we directed, Nobility, One Piece at a Time, and Building Hope, they all premiered at South by and over a period of 5-6 years, and all had, tremendous reception. And we had theatrical distribution on the first two, which is pretty unusual for a documentary. And then Building Hope won the Audience Award and was really nice. But as we ended up focusing on education and conservation issues specifically, I started making short films instead of features because at some point you can't just go to 5 continents solo and keep making films. You get tired of that. And so I started making short conservation films. And in Kenya, BirdLife International is one of the largest conservation organizations in the world. And BirdLife International was in a battle to save the last breeding ground of the African flamingos. And there are 2 kinds of flamingos in Africa, lesser and greater flamingos. They look quite differently. One is much taller than the other, but they are beautiful birds, and there are huge numbers of them. They have very long lifespans, so if you interrupt their breeding cycle, you might not notice it for a few years. You've got a couple of million of these birds, and they move at night. You don't really see them ever migrating, but they migrate at night so that raptors can't pick them out of the air and eat them. So they're really smart birds, and they feed on little tiny krill or algae. I mean, they're little tiny creatures, little crustaceans that grow in saline water. So they're in volcanic lakes. Somehow or another, they know where to fly when there's food. What they don't know is how to create a new place to breed. And they used to have a breeding lake called Magadi, Lake Magadi in southern Kenya. And in the early 60s, the British built a soda ash factory there. Soda ash is what glass is made from. And the soda ash factory, they mine the salt out of the bottom of the lake when it's dry or partially dry. And they convert it into soda ash, which is shipped overseas and turned into bottles. And that soda ash factory destroyed Lake Magadi as a breeding facility. No flamingo ever has been breeding there since. So that was bad. There was one big breeding lake left, and that is Lake Natrone in northern Tanzania. And the Tanzanian government formed a coalition with an international company to put a massively larger soda ash factory at this lake, and it really would have, it would have wiped out. The flamingos would have never bred again. And BirdLife was trying to fight it, and they were putting up a pretty good campaign. And but telling that story is hard, and I go back and forth to Kenya as we're building schools. That enables me to be there to do filmmaking work that maybe another conservation filmmaker would, they'd have to make a special trip. It becomes a very expensive thing. It wasn't an easy trip. Natrone has turned out to be probably the hardest place I've ever gone to, that includes when I broke my leg in the Grand Canyon as far as hardest. But I had been filming flamingos for a long time, actually since Nobility, the first time I went to Kenya on Nobility. And I had been to almost every lake where they feed in East Africa, but not to Natrone because it's so hard to get to. Anyway, I made this film. One of the end points of the film, we filmed one little segment in Zilker Park at a recycling center here in Austin, Texas, because there was in a really beautiful spot at the beginning of the trail, the Barton Creek Trail, there was a recycling bin, and I wanted to make the point that when you don't recycle a bottle, you're basically wringing the neck of a pink flamingo. And, recycling glass is the only thing that reduces the need for more soda ash.
Well, is that the one where you dropped the thing you did?
We got a shot of me throwing a bottle down on the ground. It took me a long time to clean it up, and
that's cool.
And it smashed in a frozen frame, and I did a dissolve from the deceased body of a flamingo in the dry lake bed at Lake Natrone, and to make that point. And in this country, it played in schools, and that's mostly who saw it. But BirdLife used it publicly, and I don't think we get all the credit. We get a little of the credit, but against all odds, because there were billions of dollars at stake with this soda ash factory, against all odds, BirdLife won, and they beat back that factory hasn't been built and probably won't ever be built, and flamingos are still breeding in great numbers. So
I have a question. Turk, don't answer this. Does anybody know what a group of flamingos are called? Oh, I know you do. No, that's cheating. Anybody else know? So do you want me to answer? Does anybody know? Flamboyance.
I thought you were a flamboyance.
Wow. I'm very flamboyant. Anyway, so let's... So, by the way, I'm going to get you. We can see these films. The short on flamingos. It's amazing. It's informative and it's great. But let's move forward to the monarchs because I think it's really cool too.
I'll do that, and I mean, we'll put it in there now for if you go to Nobility project, nobility.org, spelled like Nobel laureate, because that's who we worked with. NOBELITY.org is our website. That has links to our YouTube channel, which is Nobility Project, one word, and there's 50 or 60 short films on there. The trailers are on there. I think Building Hope is on there. The third of our features is on there in its entirety. The others are all available. They're easy to find. The Monarchs, I was a freelance writer for Texas Monthly through much of the 90s. A great gig because I covered a lot of Latin America, and I wanted to go see the Monarchs in their overwintering homes in Michoacan, Mexico. It turned out to be a little bit of a crazy trip because I was coming from another story from them at the coast of Mexico, and my bag got lost. And so I went from 100 degrees in Oaxaca to Mexico City with no luggage, and then got in a rental car and drove up to, the next day I was hiked up to 12,000 feet, and it was really cold, and I had a T-shirt. But so the first time I went to see the Monarchs, and this was 92 or 93, the numbers, if you look at the graph of the Monarch, we've been losing Monarch population really steadily for the last 30 years. They go up and down some, but I happened to go at a time when the numbers were 10 or 15 times higher than they are now. And it's staggering now how beautiful they are down there. And I ended up meeting an IMAX film crew from Mexico that was doing a segment on the Monarchs. And those IMAX film canisters weigh about 40 pounds each. And they were going up and down hauling. So I ended up hauling a couple of those canisters up the mountain. I got up there, my camera was also gone. And sometimes it's good not to have a camera and to just see it and write about it. And I really fell in love with the Monarchs. I mean, I grew up in West Texas. They used to come through.
Who doesn't like a butterfly?
They used to come. Everybody loves Monarchs. Who doesn't love Monarchs? Let's hear it for the Monarchs. Yay. So I remember when I was really little, my sisters, I had a bunch of kids in my family. My sisters shared a bedroom, and they had these floral drapes on their windows. And the Monarchs migrated through West Texas, and we had a butterfly net, and we caught about 500 Monarchs, and we put them in my sister's room. We thought that'd be really funny. And so they all landed on the flowers on the drapes. And the doors were shut, and then my mom came home. We said, hey, we want to show you something. And I was a little one. It wasn't my idea, but we opened the door, and she went, and oh, man, she was mad.
So you're blaming it on your sister? Uh-huh.
She went over there to get the screens off, open the windows. I do not harm one of these things. So it's been about 3 hours getting all the Monarchs out that had taken an hour to get in there. There were so many Monarchs back when I was a kid. It was amazing. So over the years, I've continued to go back to Michoacan. I highly recommend the trip to anybody. If you're coming from the States, you fly to Mexico City, and you can ride a bus to Zitácuaro, Mexico. You can rent a car. You can hire a driver. And I didn't make it this year, but the census on the Monarchs just came in with really good news. The Monarch numbers are up this year. They're the third highest they've been in 12 years. And people are planting milkweed. The Monarchs only feed on and lay eggs on milkweed plants. They can feed on other flowers, but primarily when they're little, they only feed on milkweed leaves when they're eggs and caterpillars. And the toxins that are in milkweeds and there's dozens and dozens of native milkweeds in the United States. It just depends on where you are. So it's a very integrated ecosystem as they migrate from Mexico City all the way into Canada, in far northeast Canada. And then that takes successive generations in 1 year. And generally, somewhere along the way back, one generation continues of Monarchs all the way to Michoacan, which is very far south of here, spend the winter in semi-hibernation. And then when it warms up, they mate, and the males die, and the females fly north, and they find milkweed and lay eggs, and it starts all over again. And if you plow down, if you're an American farmer, like big ag, and you laser level fields for miles and miles all around, as most American ag does, you've taken out all the hedgerows and the little streams and all the places where milkweed and wildflowers grow. Not only just the milkweed, but all the pollinator flowers that create nectar for monarchs and for bees and everything else. If you're spraying pesticides, you have a pretty good chance of killing monarchs. Milkweeds are called weeds. It just happens to be their name. They're fantastic
that's
plants.
kind of their name, isn't it?
It's in their name. They're beautiful. They make beautiful flowers. They're incredible. But people say, "Ooh, it's a weed. I better kill it." So we have done our bad end of the migration, loss of habitat, and too much chemicals. In Mexico, there's been a lot of logging in these forests. They're big preserves, but they're so big they're really hard to protect. And logs are worth a lot of money. So the cartels down there, they sometimes illegally log. It's been cut down. I mean, it's been reduced a great deal, but sometimes there's still illegal logging down there, and that's contributed to it. The trees keep the monarchs from freezing in the winter. If you cut them down, the air will get to the monarchs and they'll freeze. But when you see them down there, it's staggering. When the sun's not out, they are hanging on these Oyamel fir trees in the millions, literally, tree per tree. So many butterflies hanging on one big fir limb. It can be really big limbs on these huge tall trees. The limbs are bending down to the ground from the weight of the butterflies. Sometimes so many butterflies that they break these huge limbs off the trees. The weight of butterflies, which will tell you a lot about how many that is. So we made a film for Monarch. We made a couple of films for Monarch Watch, which is one of the principal groups that protects monarchs. Same thing. We'd only get tiny bit of credit for the work we've done. They do amazing work. They've been tagging. Citizen scientists have been tagging monarchs for decades with these tiny little tags that are glued on there. If you're down there, and there is a lot of mortality because there's so many monarchs, and when you're walking and you see deceased butterflies up on top of the mountain on the ground, sometimes you'll find this tiny little tag that's fallen off. Sometimes it's still affixed to a wing. And they have a number, and there's a code book. Anybody that tags, it shows where it was tagged and when. So if you or a guide down there finds it, there's a $10 bounty I think it's $10 bounty for the tag in order to turn that information in. And that's key scientific data. And people find a tag, and it's so great. You can, they look it up and say, it came from Calgary, Canada, and flew all the way here. It's amazing. Now there's actually geotags. There's actually transmitting tags, and we're able to, if you go to Monarch Watch, you can click on a link, and there's quite a number of butterflies. I don't know how they make these tags so small that a butterfly can fly a couple of thousand miles with it on it, but they can actually track them day by day. And some of them have already come through Austin. We're going to see more coming through right now. It's been dry, though, so they may go north closer to the coast.
And they go about, when I was doing the homework for this thing, about 3,000 miles. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I read is a multi-generational, though actually...
It's 4 to 5 generations from when they leave Mexico till they get... They don't all go to Canada, wherever they go to, and when they go back, it's 4 to 5 generations. And they go back... This is one thing that's really cool about the geotags, but they'll never make it. One geotag will never make the whole round trip. But when they go back, they go to presumably to the same reserves they came from. Certainly, they go to one. There's 4 or 5 different mountains down there that have monarchs, and there has been a lot of scientific study on how they're able to navigate their way back to these very. And it's the same thing with bird navigation, but monarchs have pretty small brains. And magnetic fields, the magnetic fields of the United States, the angles of the sun, there's a lot of things involved. And they even do that while they have to follow the weather, because they can't fly all the way down there if there's a south wind. When there's a south wind blowing, they're going towards Mexico, they'll veer to the east or the west, whichever way the wind is more favorable, or wherever they're feeding, and there's more flowers is more favorable. So they're doing this. And if they have to wait and the wind's fierce, they wait. And then when the wind shifts around, then they go.
Well, I can tell you, looking at the films, first of all, you should follow Turk on social media, but the films he has, I want to say millions, it's thousands of these things. It's really an incredible sight to see. It's really cool.
I was fortunate that, while we're talking about the monarchs, so because I was working with Monarch Watch, I was able to work with a couple of the conservation groups in Mexico on a little bit better access, filming access. I mean, I already go down there with my friend Joel Moreno. He has a Butterfly B&B down there, JM Butterfly B&B, which is a great place to stay, and he's a great guide. and it's in the little town of Macheros, and you ride horses up the mountains. And my friend Eric Weber's here. Eric's been up that mountain a few times, and those little mountain horses will get the two of us up there. They'll get anybody up. And the ride down's a little hairy. It's kind of steep. I like to walk down. But we work with the conservation groups down there, which give us access for a filming permit to go to areas a little closer to the monarchs and a little less just where, there's roped off areas you can go to and you can watch them. It's fantastic either way. But a couple of those trips, I was more underneath, almost underneath where the monarchs were, and it's misty and raining, and I'm filming, and a little gust of wind comes through, and then suddenly, like 200,000 monarchs just flutter out of the trees and just fall down on my head. They're landing on my camera lens, and it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
When I was watching it, I watched people in there, and they walk so slow because they don't want to disturb them and all. It's really kind of cool to watch.
When you're walking around up there, you're looking up in the air, and then there are people behind you saying, "Quit looking up." It's looking down so you don't step on a monarch that may still be alive that's on the ground. I mean, it's really a great sight.
For real, 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 for real.
And we'll be right back.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FURREALPODCAST, covered by most pet insurance.
Let's go to the mountain gorillas in the mist kind of idea. Let's talk about that, and then when we get done with this, we're going to do a Q&A. If anybody wants to ask some questions of Turk, that would be great. And after that, I really expect many people. I've got a famous comedian in here in the crowd. We're going to do really silly dad animal jokes when we get done. It's not going to be you. But anyways, Turk, let's go mountain gorillas.
It is going to be him.
I know he wants to bad.
So the gorillas.
Yeah.
So I don't know the mountain gorillas. There's lowland gorillas and mountain gorillas. The mountain gorillas live in very confined spaces on mountains in 3 countries, in the Congo and Rwanda and Uganda. And they're kind of in a conjuncture of where those 3 countries come together. There is tourism at all those 3 places, but Congo's had a war going on off and on for decades, and is not recommended for tourism, for casual tourism. The only time I was driving I had a driver, and we were in Uganda, and we were looking for lions or something, I can't remember. And I pulled out, and we were lost. And I pulled out my GPS and portable GPS before cell phones had GPS, and I was looking at it and going, I told my driver, I said, "Hey, I think we're in Congo." And he said, turn around, immediately slammed on the brakes and looked at my little dial on my GPS and did a U-turn, and we were driving about 4 times as fast the other way trying to get back out of Congo. In Bwindi, Uganda is a really fantastic place to see the mountain gorillas. And there is a program there called Conservation Through Public Health, ctph.org. And the woman who founded this organization is a Ugandan veterinarian. She's a doctor, Dr. Gladys Zikosima. And Dr. Gladys is quite well known around the world. And she's, the Ugandan Dian Fossey. And Dian Fossey did really, really amazing work, but also, if you've ever read her book, a little bit crazy. At least it seemed like to me. And Dr. Gladys.
What do you mean by that?
Dr. Gladys is just a fantastic scientist with a big heart. And the work that they do to protect the gorillas is really key, but also the work that they do with the surrounding communities is just as key. Conservation doesn't work unless anybody who lives where these animals are, like the butterflies, if you live around the mountains of these butterflies and there's tourism in one town, but there's no tourism in the other town, there's no incentive for the people in the other town to protect butterflies. And in the case of the gorillas can often come out of the mountains, and there's banana plantations that surround these reserves. And the gorillas may go, there's not much to eat up here now, let's go down to the plantation. So some of Dr. Gladys's work started when they found a baby gorilla who was deceased, and it had lost most of its fur, and it probably froze to death because it's cold up there at night. And it turned out that what had happened is this gorilla, probably a family of gorillas, had come down, and the baby had picked up a kid's knit stocking cap, and as a toy, it's a gorilla. It's like, look at this, it's fun. Played with it and the whole thing. Probably put it on the head. Anyway, the theory is, and probably most likely, is that cap had scabies and had lice on it. And your kid goes to school, you get hair lice. You go home, you got to wash all the sheets, and you got to go to the drugstore, and you got to wash their hair, and it's miserable. And a few days later, you get it fixed. With the gorilla, it just gets worse and worse and worse. So the interaction really has to be reduced, but you still have to provide for all of these people that live in farms all around there. If you take a photo of the conservation areas, there's this beautiful mountain, and you'll see just a line. There's not a fence, it's just a line up the mountain, and this side is farms, and that side is dense forest. And so it is, there's no real defined barriers. You couldn't possibly fence these gorillas in. So Dr. Gladys started this program. The dedication's incredible. There are multiple family groups of gorillas that they have acclimated to visitors. So when you see footage on social media of somebody that saw the mountain gorillas and there's a big silverback or there's a baby, it's all very tightly controlled. You pay a lot of money in advance for a permit to go see them. You go through a counseling in the morning, through an orientation with a Uganda wildlife ranger who tells you what you can and cannot do. You can't go within 10 paces of the gorillas because you don't want the gorillas to become too acclimated to people. They're wild. You can't. You can only be with the gorillas for a very short time. You may hike a few hours to get to them, but when you get there, you still only got about a half an hour with the gorillas. Because same thing, they don't want the gorillas to think, oh, we just live with whoever these creatures are that come and see us. If you stay longer than they're accustomed to, they get unhappy and start making noises and saying, you're done, get out of here. So they coordinate all of this work, but they also they take fecal samples from the nests. Gorillas build nests every night out of vines and flowers. They're really beautiful, the nests, these big nests of vines and flowers to stay warm in. And there is poop in the nest. It's not the most dinner-worthy topic, but the reason they do that is because that's part of what keeps them from freezing at night. And acclimation apparently doesn't stick to them. So there you go. They take fecal samples from the gorillas, and they look at them in a microscope once a week from all the gorilla nests they can get to, certainly in all the gorilla groups, and to make sure that they don't have any parasites that they've gotten from a human source or from a stream or anything else. They have DNA samples from all the gorillas in freezers. It's just an amazing program. They support the local communities through education, through healthcare, through birth control, family planning programs. And it's not exactly what you'd think of as birth control over here. They go to these villages and they meet with people, and they're Batwa villages, which historically people called the pygmies. They're not pygmies. They're maybe a little bit shorter than some people you see. They're the Batwa people. They're an amazing tribe. They have beautiful customs and music and dancing. They make banana wine and banana gin and banana beer, all of which my friend Eric is going to tell a joke for us, has sampled.
No, he's not.
And and so they go in like the family planning thing. One of the reasons it's hard to feed your family is that if you don't have family planning, you just keep having more kids. And in places where there's been historically a lot of infant mortality, it's hard to change that thinking, because historically, even in this country, 100 years ago in this country, people had a lot of kids because a lot of kids didn't make it. Childhood inoculations have really changed the survival rate of the world in just massive levels. But that means if you still have 9 or 10 or 11 kids, you're not going to be able to feed them. So they go into these villages and they explain family planning. They explain, we want to help you have kids when you want to have kids, not just when they're appearing, because you got pregnant because you didn't know you were going to get pregnant. And they also explain to people, which is another great conservation tool in these kind of communities, which is that if you wait a while to have kids, then the wife is going to be able to earn a living, and you're going to have 2 incomes. When they say silence the phone, does that include dropping it? They're going to have 2 incomes, and then the husbands are going, oh, wow, I'm not going to have to work as hard. We're going to have more money, and then we can have kids in a few years. So they do really, really great work. And if anybody ever goes to Burundi, highly recommend that you tour the CTPH headquarters and laboratories. It's pretty cool.
I've had the opportunity to see the gorillas in Rwanda. There's 3 countries now. It's Congo, Rwanda, and Uganda, right?
Yeah.
And I can tell you truthfully, and I've had the opportunity to travel all over the world and have great things. Top 5 things I've ever done in my life is to go see that. So I'd highly recommend it to everybody. One of the things that you didn't mention, kind of sort of did, but is the gorillas get the same diseases that we get, so we pass it on. When you
we share most of our DNA with gorillas.
Yeah. So they can catch all that kind of stuff from us. So it's really important, and they're doing some amazing ways to really protect it. Like when I was in Rwanda, you're only allowed an hour with the gorillas. That's it. They're very protective of it, and by far the best hour of my life. It's the craziest thing ever. It's really amazing.
The first time I filmed with CTPH, the first time I trekked with the gorillas, I carried a pretty big video camera. I mean, now you can shoot these films on a phone, but you used to have to carry still camera and video camera and audio equipment, lights. I was carrying a pretty big video camera, and I had a monopod, which I could use as a hiking stick, but a heavy monopod for my still camera. And we had a really long, hot hike up and down the mountains, and we got to. Guide said, okay, the gorillas are just over this hill, so we're going to go over the hill. Remember everything I told you, and now it sticks down. And I said, what? And he goes, how about this huge, heavy monopod I've been carrying all day long? And he said, oh, I guess they didn't mention that back at orientation, but the gorillas don't like sticks. So I carried that monopod all day long and just left it behind while we went and filmed. So we made this film for CTPH about pretty much the things I just talked about. And there was their office and their laboratory was in a tin shack. And it was amazing that they were doing this work out of this tiny little thing. And Dr. Gladys took our short film. There was a global Great Ape Symposium, I think in 3 countries. And Dr. Gladys went and spoke. And once again, I'd say most of the credit probably goes to her speaking and the work that she does. But they showed this film at these 3 places as a fundraiser at the Great Ape Symposium, and they raised the funds to buy a piece of land and build a new gorilla clinic, which is the one they're at now. And they've since built a new, like a B&B hostel that's associated with that. So, these short films really can have an impact. Telling stories, a podcast, can really have an impact on what's going on in the world. And it's the same thing. If you plant milkweed and pollinator flowers in your yard and the butterflies feed on them, you have an impact.
So I'm going to have one thing on the gorilla thing, and then we're going to do Q&A, and please have some questions for him. He's a wealth of knowledge. So my experience when I'm there, when they tell you to go up there, instead of the stick, they tell you, whatever you do, when you see the gorilla, don't point at them. So they have you put your bags down, you see the gorillas, and of course, if you know me, you know me, there's a gorilla right away. And I immediately did that, and they go, and all this stuff. But anyways, so I'm going to move the mic up here. Please come up here. You got a wealth of knowledge here. Come up. Let's ask some questions.
My name is Amber. I wanted to ask you about the community around one you didn't talk about, but in Kenya, Old Pejeta. You talked about the conservation and what they do, and that is such a success story. And Nobility and the other partners in Austin that have a big part in working with that whole area.
Thank you, Amber. Old Pejeta is a very large conservancy. I think it's 250,000 acres in Kenya, in Laikipia Plateau in Kenya. It's near Mount Kenya in Nanyuki. And it's an integrated wildlife management program. They the wildlife at Old Pejeta they intermix to a certain extent with agriculture. So there are huge herds of cattle, and there are all the animals of East Africa are at Old Pejeta, and including large numbers of elephants, very large numbers of rhinos. It's the largest black rhino population in East Africa. They have the last two northern white rhinos there, which we could talk about briefly. The last male, Sudan, passed away. And Old Pejeta, they have basically an army to protect all these animals, the rhinos and the elephants, obviously for the poaching reasons, for the ivory and the horns. But they've had a really tremendous success rate in stopping poaching, and one of the ways they do that is they've partnered with all of these mini communities that surround Old Pejeta to build schools, to build health centers. Many of the people that surrounding communities work for the Conservancy. We kind of fit into the Nobility Project. Kind of fits into it in two ways, because we've built quite a number of schools in Kenya. We built all or part of about 60 schools in rural Kenya. These are public schools. I don't know how to run a school in Kenya, but I'm pretty good at building them. And so we can stay at Old Pejeta, and we just have kind of worked our way around at different communities around there to build water systems and libraries and classrooms and science labs. We're just building a new high school now. Well, anytime we do that work, or anytime they're doing health center work or something, they're making closer friends with the community that surrounds them. So if a poacher comes in, and the people who you hear about poaching, the poaching in Kenya is down to nearly zero the last few years, but the people who come in to poach, they're not the guys who make the big money. There's an international cartel that wants to smuggle, ivory to China, perhaps, or want to smuggle, rhino horn to Southeast Asia, where it's ground up and used for reasons that it doesn't actually apply to, because it's just keratin. So rhino horn's the same as your fingernails. These cartels will tell somebody, and have somebody in Kenya who goes around and they find somebody who has no money and no education and no hope in the world, and they say, hey, I just heard of some guy who said if somebody happened to find a rhino horn from a rhino, that maybe they'd buy it from them. And they'll go to like crummy little bar that's got like 6 guys in there talking about how hard they work today. And somebody will come in and say, yeah, if anybody ever heard anything like that, that's crazy. Well, somebody from the community now will immediately call Old Pejeta and say, there was a guy in our town last night trying to buy a horn. So the guy with the rusty gun who crawls under the fence and lays out in the field for 3 days and maybe somewhere does get to kill an animal and take away, he's the guy that's going to get caught, and he's not the guy who's going to make the hundreds of thousands of dollars that come from these animal products. And, it's the same thing. It's a partnership with the communities that make it work. Amber was asking about the 2 rhinos. So northern white rhinos were poached to extinction, a lot of it through wars and some of it through poaching in their range, which is across much of the upper middle band of Africa. And the last 3 alive were in a zoo, and they were in Europe, and they were moved. They were moved. They were located to Old Pejeta Conservancy to try to find a way to save the species. Was a father and then a mother and daughter. Sudan was the male. Sudan was unable to reproduce, but they were able to get sperm from Sudan, and they were sperm from zoos from other animals as well, from pure northern whites. The 2 females, Najin and Fatu, are mother-daughter, and one is too old to have babies, and one has got some physical issues, which happens. So there's been an enormous scientific effort, almost a global effort, to save this species through in vitro fertilization. No one's ever done in vitro before with a rhino, but it has now been done. But you can't take a chance on implanting a fertilized egg, even if you can create one in one of these 2 female rhinos, because might go wrong, you lose one of the last 2 northern whites. So Old Pejeta has moved southern white rhinos, which are closely related species, into areas with the northern whites, one in particular, Tawu, who doesn't like me at all, in with the two more gentle northern whites, so that she can help raise a baby if a baby is born, but she can also help the two zoo-raised rhinos be a little more wild and not so trusting of humans. And then the idea is first you have to create an in vitro fertilized egg for a southern white rhino and implant it in a southern white rhino and make sure it works, a proof of concept, which has worked so far, but didn't go all the way to term. But there are quite a number now of pure northern white fertilized embryos that are awaiting implant, and science may save this species yet. So where's our other question?
My name is Amy Bird. I actually watched one of your documentaries, I believe, about the Nobility project. Mm-hmm. In terms of that, I just want to highlight that I know you talked about 60 public schools, but that's about 25,000 students a year. So I think we need to pay more attention to that and give more props for all of the work that you're doing. I think that's incredible. I've loved hearing about all of your amazing animal encounters, and I guess I was just going to ask what has been, other than like the rainfall of the monarchs that makes me want to book that trip immediately, what have been some other magical encounters with the gorillas, with the monarchs, with the rhinos?
Well, thank you so much. That's a great question, and thank you for talking about the kids. You got 25,000 kids a year. The valedictorians from all the high schools that we've built get a scholarship if they want to do a 4-year degree. They can put them through college for 4 years with the other support they get from the university. And we've had 100 college graduates that come out of those high schools. So, and we are going to segue this year into a permanent endowment in Kenya, and actually 2 permanent university endowments here in Austin, Texas. So we haven't really sent out all the details on that, but education is really key, and education is key in the wildlife areas too, because a lot of these kids at these schools, the big difference I see in the 20 years I've been working in these Kenyan schools as well, it's amazing. Most kids didn't go to high school when I started, so there's been huge differences. There weren't any high schools to go to. But the school system is much better. The schools, the infrastructure, graduation rates, attendance rates, there's a equivalency between girls and boys now. A lot of girls didn't go to school when I started. Now there's actually more girls going to school than there are boys. It should be every single one. There's more girls going on to college, and there's more girls graduating, same as in the United States, by the way. So boys need to get with it out there.
Girls rule, boys drool.
Yeah. I have been lucky to see a lot of amazing things. 3 years ago, I was in the Masai Mara, which is the site of the northern end, the Kenyan end of the famous migration, wildebeest, zebra, gazelle migration, and was with my friend Mike Saitoti Ole Morijoy, and Mike, we were going out really early in the morning. It was nearly dark, and we were on a graded road, one that's fairly well traveled, going to a more remote area. And Mike put on the brakes really quickly, and if he stops quickly, there's something to see. And we looked over, and as we looked, 20 feet away, a baby elephant was being born. And I have known a lot of guides in Kenya. I have known a lot of people in Kenya. I do know a lot of people in Kenya. And I've actually, even among all the guides, I've never known anybody who ever saw a baby elephant born. Now, this baby was in its afterbirth, so we're talking moments here. And because it was a public travel road, we were staggered. A few of us were filming and taking photos. But I said, "This is too close to the road." Mike said, "No, yeah, we can't go anywhere. We have to stay here and make sure that they're not disturbed, because a baby can't go for a long time." So we stayed a couple of hours. We got to see this baby dry off, and the mother dry the baby off, and the baby kind of move away a little bit and shakily get it onto legs and fall down and up and fall down and then up, and the mother elephant holding the baby up with her trunk under its belly. And we stayed quite some time until the Rangers came. I call the Rangers, and they came to protect them. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, that I ever hope to see. And the baby, they now call Baby Turk, although Baby Turk is no longer a baby. Baby Turk is 5 feet tall and doing really well.
I call you Baby Turk.
Still with the mom.
I just call you Baby.
And still doing well. But in that whole thing about being connected to the local community, when the Rangers came and they were there, and they know Mike, but they were obviously very appreciative. They got to take care of this baby, and not by doing anything except making sure nobody disturbs the baby. But they also said to Mike, and they were telling him something, and they were talking in Swahili really fast, and I couldn't understand because my kid's Swahili is terrible. And I got a little bit. I heard Simba here and there, and I heard about croton bushes and one thing or another. So when we left, what they told Mike was that pregnant female lion that we've been seeing, I saw her go a few days ago into this group of bushes, and I never saw her come out. And I think she's still in there, which means that she had her cubs. And we drove for about 45 minutes or an hour. We came over a hill, and there were there were probably 500 of these little groups of bushes. They all looked exactly the same. And I was like, which one? And Mike said, I think it's that one over there. And we drove over, and we drove around these bushes. And it's about 10 feet across the bushes or 8 feet across there. We're driving really, really slowly, and it's very dark under there. Baby lions, when they're born, have got to be completely hidden. There's so many raptors and other hyenas and other lions from another tribe, for another pride. They have to be hidden for a long time. And we drove around, and I had my really long lens on with the light opened up crazy wide and was looking through it, and I saw an eye. And these cubs they would fit in just your two hands close to each other. And so in the same morning, I saw the two most amazing things I've probably seen anywhere. Kenya is a very magical place. By the way, follow up on that, Mike and I, for years, Mike told me a story about being lost in the Mara when he was 4.5 years old. He lived in a little manada village, and he went out with the herders, and he didn't get back before a storm. He took a wrong turn, and he was lost for 5 days in the Masai Mara, and no food, and lost, lonely, scared, and was accompanied almost the entire way by a lioness. And he kept telling me this story, and it never changed. And I realized after about the fourth time he told me, this story's got to be true. And then I heard more of the story, and I met someone who was in the car when he was rescued. And Mike and I, this year, we published a story called Boy and the Lion in Kenya with the Story Motion publishers who provide the books at the libraries at all our schools over there. And that book, in a longer version, a young adult version, is coming out in September in the U.S. from Scanchi Press, The Boy and the Lion. It's really a beautiful book. So.
We did an episode on that a couple months ago, so that's worth listening to. So we're going to kind of tighten up now. Does anybody have a really silly dad animal joke? I have somebody who's going to do it. All right. Come on up here, Ashton.
Come on.
Woo! My name is Ashton Arthur.
And what's your joke?
Have you ever seen an elephant hiding behind a strawberry?
No.
Duh, he's hiding.
Good one.
There went your joke, Eric.
Okay, so I just need you to know this. This is Waylon Henry Kyle. He has been on the show for a long time, but he's in town for South by Southwest, and he granted me the time to actually tell his joke. So, Waylon, let's hear your joke.
Knock, knock. Dishes. Dishes, the police. Open up.
Hey, everybody, thank you so much. Turk, what a great story. We're going to have to keep doing this thing. You made the podcast better, and I really appreciate being on the show.
I'll be happy to make up another whole story like all of those next time.
That'll be good. And then, last for everybody, I really always feel so blessed. First of all, this SoHo House here, The staff and the team have been just wonderful for me. I wouldn't have been able to do this. They've been great to me. My entire family's here, over here, which is pretty cool. That famous comedian happens to be related to me. But for all the listeners and everybody else, you're the guys that really make this happen. I can't get great guests like Turk. So thank you so much. For real.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.